So welcome. I think this is WebChat number 10. And we're excited to have Laura Fitch with us tonight. I will put a link in the chat to the cohousing.org website where you can make a donation in support of these programs. As you know, we don't ask you to pay anything for them for the privilege of attending, but they do cost the association some money to put together, and so we appreciate your support of that. And I think that's our program. So with that, I'd like to introduce Laura Fitch, who's with us tonight from Massachusetts. Laura is a nationally recognized co-housing architect, and she is a principal architect with Fitch Architecture and Community Design. And she is going to talk to us tonight about design review. And I think that's up to you. And if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, great. There we go. Okay, do you see it?
We do.
And I'm ready to go?
You're ready.
Okay, so this is actually a presentation that I put together for our own community. Pioneer Valley is now 25 years old, and it's a suburban community in which we actually, I would say, we encouraged people to make changes to their units after they moved in. We certainly didn't discourage them, except for the fact that we had a design review process. So I'm not really sure how this would, if this design review is as relevant to urban communities where there might be less ability to make changes, but certainly in a suburban community where it's mostly singles, duplexes, and a few triplexes, it's been very relevant. And are people hearing me okay? Because I hear some background.
I'm looking for mutes here to get that solved. Sounds like it got settled. Okay.
Okay, great. So I'm going to give you the history of our own community and the challenges that we had in both the architecture and in implementing the design review, and take you through a whole, introduction and various responsibilities, design categories. We have a number of appendixes within our manual that we've written, and there's an appeal process. So in Pioneer Valley Cohousing, we have 32 housing units, and it's very suburban. There's plenty of space. And what you see in red are, and this is in 2011, since then we've had 2 more additions. What you see in red are additions that people added to their houses. And what you see in brown are porches that people added to their houses. So we've had a lot of additions. And then we've also had all sorts of people adding a window or changing a door, things like that. And I guess from the very beginning, we had some sort of design review. No, in fact, I don't think we did. But during construction, somebody made a major change that another neighbor didn't really like. And it triggered our decision to make a design review process. And it's actually been an extremely challenging process in our community. And I think it's, right off the bat, I'd say it's partly because we have different values, particularly around individual versus community. I think everyone that moved into co-housing said, I want community at my doorstep. But we're so used to having individual control of our own house and the land right outside of it. The expertise is very specialized. So, and I guess I mentioned this, the last item too, there's sort of tension between professionals and homeowners. So as an architect in the community, and I didn't design the community, but I was one of the sort of educated clients who helped was the interface between the community and the architects. But then I've gone on to be architect for many of the additions, and I've also been sort of a critique of many of the additions and things. So there's a tension there between professionals and homeowners and community and individual. There's time pressures. Often people don't even think about doing a design change or they don't think about even telling the community until after they've hired a contractor and already started work. That's happened a number of times. People just forget that they even should go through a process. Or they start the process really late and they want to get it done before winter sets in. It was very confusing at first. We had either no manual or our manual was not very well written, so that didn't help. We have requirements for drawings, and some people can draw really well themselves. Some people are annoyed that therefore they might have to hire an architect to draw them. And then, of course, there's money involved. Any change to a building can have significant costs. Now, one of the things at Pioneer Valley Cohousing is that our original construction had some serious design flaws and construction flaws. And a lot of it had to do with us not paying enough money to the architects to do a good design. And we were on a hill, and our roofs, the way our roofs intersect, we sort of let anyone say, I want a 3-bedroom house next to a 1-bedroom house, or I want my 2-bedroom here, which means I'm going to be attached to a 4-bedroom. And so all the roofs came together in crazy ways that the architects never had time to resolve. And some of those crazy intersections happen on the north side, and we're in winter climate. So right off the bat, we had some issues with our roofs on the north sides of our houses. And also we had people doing some changes, like that porch was added or changed during construction, and not enough attention was paid to details at roof intersections for flashing and things like that. So we actually had water problems, roof leaking and things like that. And then our process just wasn't very sensitive. So a lot of feelings were hurt. Fingers were pointed, like you didn't give us enough time, or you're not giving us time, or you didn't build this well, or you didn't detail this well, or, you know, and so in reacting to the problems, we developed, the manual kept changing and developing and updated. And then we did a major overhaul of it, you know, 5 years ago, which is 20 years into our living together. Because we're still, 20 years later, people are still making changes to their units. And so this is our, you know, front cover of our design review manual. And this manual is available, or will be made available for you to download, as well as like a step-by-step worksheet that we have as well. And we have, we now implement, not consensus, now I'm at loss for words here, dynamic governance. And so every 3 years we try to update our policies because we consider them living documents. So this says that we're going to review it again in 3 years. Or actually that time, anyway. So first of all, we thought it was important to decide what is the purpose of a design review process. And initially, our manual pretty much said it was to help homeowners get what they want. It was to help them with the design. So they would come expecting like the professionals like myself to sort of like just help them. And then we realized, actually, the purpose of design review is to protect the assets of the community. We are a condominium association in which we own the outside of everyone's house. And if somebody does a bad job with an addition and causes a leak, brings the roofs together in a bad way without proper flashing and it leaks, and that's happened, or they don't air seal around skylights that they add, which has happened, and that they leak, the community doesn't want to be liable for it. Nor do we want people to make things that are so funky that it affects the resale value of houses. So that became kind of the #1 thing, that we were trying to protect the assets of the community. And we're also trying to ensure that the community is informed. So if somebody wants to make a change, we want to make sure that there's a process by which their neighbors know what their change is. And I mentioned that we use dynamic governance, so we have various circles of responsibility, and we're now realizing that we want different circles to have input on the design. So buildings and grounds, they care about the durability of the structures and drainage around the structures. PALs, they care about plant materials, so if you're gonna, we don't just have design review for buildings, we also have design review for gardens and plants and trees, big trees and things like that. so they care about plants and drainage. Finance cares about the impact on condominium fees, because what we discovered is people were adding on big additions, but they still had their condo fee based on their small units. So we had to figure out ways in which those would be adjusted. And so Finance Committee oversees that. And then Care and Council, they're a circle of governance that helps with interpersonal relationships. And so we've actually had some real struggles where somebody wants to put an addition in too close to somebody else's house, and it's caused interpersonal difficulties. We want to make sure that adequate drawings are provided so people understand the project, and also so that it's built correctly. And we want to encourage accessibility. Our particular community was built on a hill when we were all young, and it's a challenge in the wintertime in particular to move up and down our hill on ice. And also many of the front doors are not on grade. So any project where, if we're going through a design review, if we see an opportunity to increase accessibility, we'll make that happen through this design review process. And then it's really important to say what design review doesn't cover. We don't care about the changes that you make internally to your home envelope, as long as you're not compromising that building envelope. And in a cold climate, you can compromise an envelope just by punching a hole in the wall and not air sealing it, because then humidity from your house can get into the building envelope and cause damage. So even though we say we don't really care what happens within your house, we do have a policy around punctures that people make to their building envelope. So we also put together criteria for evaluating proposals that people put forward. And this is the very first item, called compelling rationale. That was added just recently. And what we had discovered is that people were saying, I want to do this addition, but they weren't really giving the community a reason to say yes. Or somebody would say, I want to build a really big window that looks totally different than all the other windows in the community. But, and other people saying, no, I don't really like that window. You should look like the others. And people like, no, it's aesthetics is in the eye of the beholder. I should be able to do what I want. And what we discovered is that we wanted the onerous of the compelling rationale for a change to be on the homeowner making the proposal. And there's more about that later, and it's in our appendix, and I'll show you that. So that's one of the criteria for evaluating. One is the impact on the exterior spaces. We recognize the exterior space is where community interfaces, so that's why it's so high on the list. That's where people see each other, is when they walk between units. Impact on the master plan, impact on community members, safety and light pollution, making accessibility improvements, aesthetic considerations. So without saying exactly what the proportion and scale need to be, we're suggesting certain things to, we want it to look similar without to the rest of the community. And we want certain finishes and materials that are durable. A lot of people have been adding solar panels and then mini splits, which are the air conditioning units that also do heating in the winter, that have outside condensing units. So we're being very careful about where those condensing units are, so they don't make noise or be in somebody's view shed, and how the pipes for them go up the sidewall. So that has to go through a design review. And we're really concerned about regional considerations for and using flashings in the walls and roof details. And of course, there's safety and code. So it's good to have criteria, and the criteria for your particular community might be different. And then there's also, we're made a list of different responsibilities. So for instance, whose responsibility is it to create the drawings? Or whose responsibility is it to meet code? So we try to be really clear about that. And the main responsibility for design review committee is to provide a transparent process for dialogue, to aid community members in making design decisions, to educate the community about issues that are created by poor design, and to assist in conceptualizing and understanding design ideas. The homeowner is responsible for following the procedures. So we have this manual that has very specific procedures, and ultimately that's their job, is to follow them. They need to provide that compelling rationale. They need to contact DigSafe if anyone's going to be digging. They have to hire a clerk of the works, and the clerk of the works is somebody that's going to represent the community during construction. Because what we had is people who design additions that hire a contractor, and the contractor wouldn't put in flashing and would have a roof leak. Well, now we're going to have a member, somebody that represents the community, overseeing that construction, and the homeowner is going to pay for it. They need to attend construction meetings. They need to update the drawings that are in the community files. So even if they hire an outside architect, they need to give it to somebody like me who maintains the community files. And they have to provide a 3-year warranty, so that even though the community owns the exterior envelope of the buildings, we aren't responsible for their roof until after at least 3 years. And the communities also have some responsibilities. The community is actually responsible for reading and reviewing the sketches, and to responding in a timely manner, and to seeking help and or mediation when needed. So if they say, oh, I hate this design, their responsibility is actually to give that information in a timely manner, to not wait till the homeowner has invested a lot of time and money into this whole process. And the design committee is not responsible for condo and development fee updates, for safety and building code violations, for construction techniques. You know, we're being really clear that we don't want to get involved in any legal issues. So this is our procedures chart. And this is actually an old version of it, but you'll have the new version if you will be available for download. And it has, I think I have the front page here and the last page, and it says 6 pages. I think it's more than that now, because we keep adding steps. So the very first step here is to determine what category of change you're proposing. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And then depending on the category, you can see across the top, it says A, B, C, D. A is additions to homes, so that's a pretty big category. B is major changes to the house and landscape. So an addition is actually something that sticks out onto community land. So if we are a condominium association and we bought a house that has a certain footprint, the community owns the land around that house. In our particular case, I know there's some things about private use spaces, but we don't have that. So if somebody wants to build a porch or a deck, they're actually going out onto community land. So that's what we just call an addition. And we actually have to have a formal yes from the community for that. Major changes to houses and landscapes, that might be the addition of a door, or addition of a window, or changing your railings on your deck or something, but it's not actually changing the footprint. And C is a change to community building, and D is little minor changes like to the landscape or exterior lighting or something like that. And there's different procedures that you have to follow for each of these categories. So if you look down at item 3 that says talk with neighbors, it's required for all of these. But if you look up the one above it, get a representative from Care and Counsel, like to help you through the process, it's only required if you have unresolved objections that come up. It's always required for category A, but it's not usually required for the others. So we sort of imagined all sorts of different scenarios and put them into this chart. And this is the last page of the, so we're looking at step 18 here at the very bottom, is to scan and upload this chart into our Google Drive to show that you've actually done all these, have it signed off that you've done all these steps. The item above that, get buildings and grounds to sign off after construction is complete. So this is your warranty, your 3-year warranty period doesn't start until you actually have buildings and grounds look at the quality of the construction. So that's our procedures chart. I didn't explain many of the steps, but like I said, there's many of them. There's at least 18. And this is to illustrate the different design categories. So addition to houses, there's an increase in the house footprint. So it's living space additions, decks and porches, sheds, anything that has a foundation or is attached to the house. And those are just 2 examples in our community of porches that were added. On the left, it was an addition and a porch, and on the right was a big screen porch. Category B is major changes to the house and the landscape that doesn't change the footprint. So dormers that are added to the roof, a new exterior door, new window or skylight or roof or wall penetration. And that even includes things like a wall penetration for an air conditioner or a wall penetration for a gas stove or something like that, because what we found is that people weren't flashing these and that water was getting into the buildings that way. And it's also major changes to landscape features such as extensive paths or retaining walls. So that path there with the porch, the railing next to it, those all went through design review. Category C is additions to the community buildings. So that's not our car shed at the bottom, that's from some other community, but that a lot of communities will add something like solar car sheds later. On our common house on the lower right, we added that octagon porch after the fact. On the upper right, there's the chicken shed that we added. So those are the type of things that a circle within the community might suggest, like the Common House Committee might say we want to put make that porch into a screen porch, which actually we've done, and it would go through some level of design review. Usually we're just happy for whatever somebody proposes doing to make our common house better. And we're less happy about what people propose to their own houses, because then we don't all share in the benefit. And category D is minor changes to existing homes, landscapes, community buildings, exterior lighting. So exterior lighting, we care because we want dark skies. We care about people's paint color. Mainly, we want the neighbor that's looking at your house to like your paint color. Minor walks and terraces, signs, minor modifications to porches and decks, trellises, taller, extensive plantings. We're really sensitive about somebody putting a tree that's going to block your solar access. And now, 25 years into living here, we actually have trees that are too big and problematic, and so we have a design review process for removing trees. And we're very sensitive about that because we have to balance people who want them for, carbon reducing and shade and such like that, and others who are concerned about branches falling on their houses and stuff. So that's an interesting process. And I mentioned compelling rationale, and I'm going to, I have it spelled 2 different ways here. I guess I need to fix that. So the definition that we have is that it's a sufficiently compelling reason for the individual to ask for a change. It considers many levels. It considers the community scale. So we're used to actually talking about design on the community scale, like, oh, that addition is going to shade the path and there'll be more ice. So that we're used to that being important. But we added these other things, the building scale and the detail scale, because just recently we had an addition where the immediate neighbor, who was me actually, was okay with the building scale and the community scale, but not the detail. It was a case of a window proportions. And so we then started talking about, well, that's legitimate as well for community to have input on. It's not just about sort of bigger impacts. So we defined 3 different scales. And the reason compelling rationale became a big deal is that in our dynamic governance, we use paramount objections as a way to object to a proposal. And what we discovered is when we switched to dynamic governance, if we had a design review meeting, people would say, if somebody had an objection, like if I said, oh, but I don't really like that window, somebody would say, is that a paramount objection? And I'd be like, why are we talking about paramount objections? I'm just like giving you initial feedback. And so we were using that terminology right off the bat to sort of, and it felt like it was squashing input, and when we really were wanting to get people's input. And so that's why when we flipped it around, instead of saying it's on the onerous of the objecting person to have a compelling objection, it's actually the onerous of the the homeowner to give a compelling reason. And this is the reason that actually this is so much different than other decisions in co-housing. And so reasons for adopting this. The design review proposals typically come from an individual, specifically to benefit the individual, as opposed to the typical co-housing proposals that come from a circle, presumably to benefit the entire community. So whenever we have a community, a circle saying, hey, let's make a change to the common house, they're doing it for the benefit of the entire community. When you have a homeowner that says, hey, I want to do an addition, they're doing it for the benefit of themselves. And even though it benefits the community to help them live comfortably in their house, it's like a totally different scenario. And so that's why we sort of changed this whole thing around and came up with this compelling rationale. And I think, now I'm going to move kind of quickly. This is just example of the type of drawings that we require for a simple project. If it's really a simple project, somebody just wants to put 3 more feet onto their porch, this sketch is adequate. If somebody wants to do a big addition, then, or this is a porch and a mudroom type of addition, we expect actually working drawings, like produced by an architect with details, and even something showing the assembly of the wall, so, and that there's flashing up at where the roof meets the wall and that sort of thing. So totally different types of drawings. And then we want people to update the community files. So the community has maintained files for all the buildings, and we actually use them when we bid out painting and repairs and things like that. So we want them up to date. And so if they haven't actually hired me, because I'm the one that maintains the community files, then they have like some minor fee, which I rarely charge, to have me update the drawings. So appendix. So in our appendix, so we have this manual. It has many different items in its appendix. And we have some standard specifications. So these are the type of windows and doors you're supposed to use, in terms of, like, we don't want wooden windows that then we have to paint. They have to be aluminum clad or something like that. And we want exterior trim that's not going to warp and it will hold paint. So we are very specific about some things. And then we have, we sort of describe all in another appendix the possible roles that different people play. So there's the homeowner, there's a design review representative, there's somebody that, care and council who takes care of the whole community, there's, Cherry Hill, the association. All these are different players within it. And this graphic was done just to help people understand why it's so complex, and that care and council is kind of looking at the, taking care of the whole community, and the design review folks are just taking care of the design. Clerk of the works. We actually require, like I said, if somebody has an addition, that they hire clerk of the works, and this is a form that the clerk of the person that shows up and is representing the community will fill out when they go to the job site and make sure certain things are done. And then what is this one? Oh, so there's also additional homeowner responsibility. So I talked a little bit about like wall penetrations. If they do an interior change that messes with the building envelope, they have responsibility for that. Something like if they have a roof leak, we require that they have a really timely, immediate, in other words, report of that to the buildings and grounds folks. They are responsible. We actually say that homeowners are responsible for painting their porches and doing porch and deck repairs. The community doesn't own that, even though it's on the outside of their building. So we're very clear about some of that stuff. And we have an appeal and grievance process. And I'm sorry if this is a picture of any of you out there. It's just such a funny picture. Everyone looks kind of annoyed or tired, so we thought it was a good one for if people aren't happy with the decisions that were made in the design review, they can go, there's a process by which it can be changed or followed through. And it also says that the community can put construction on hold, and I think we've actually done that. One of the reasons to have an appeal is if a community member just sort of goes ahead without, or makes change during construction without going through the right procedures. And so the available documents that you can get from Coho US after this slideshow is this slideshow itself, the design review manual, our 2018 version, which includes all these appendixes, and then a separate document, which is Appendix A, which is that procedures chart. And I think that's it.
Great. Okay, time for questions. And Laura, if you want to unshare your screen, then we'll be able to see each other as we're asking questions. And those watching, we don't have a lot in the chat yet. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and ask Laura a question about anything to do with design review. She might even answer other questions about architecture related to co-housing. We'll see.
Sure. That'd probably be more fun, but.
Okay, so it's open season. You can put questions in the chat or unmute and ask the architect.
This is Julia from Village Hearth. My first web chat. I'm so excited. We're a new community. We've just broken ground. We're going to hopefully, fingers crossed, move in spring of 2020. And I'm the process committee chair and trying to put together what processes would be a benefit to us. And I think this is one that is going to be wonderful. I feel like I'm ahead of the game being exposed to all this fabulous information. So thank you very much. And I see all the things that we can get. And where do I just go to Pioneer Co-Housing and I can find the stuff there?
It's easier than that. It is already posted on the website for the Co-Housing Association, which is cohousing.org. And if you look, there's a connect, I think, menu with web chats, and then the past web chats link from there. And I've got all the documents linked. You should be able to get them through that website, along with all the other web chats, and eventually the recording of this web chat will be there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That was very, 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 very easy to follow. I appreciate it.
And I just want to say is that in our community, we don't have a lot of hard policies like this. Like this might give you the impression that, wow, we're real sticklers for policies. We have these charts and we follow these tasks and everything like that. This is the only area in which we have a policy like that.
Yeah, I know, Jerry.
And then we also, well, we do have a policy around common house use, and it's pretty strict, but it's not as strict as this.
Yeah, but I know this was going to be important to us because there's already been the buzz about this. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and get ahead of the game. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to grab the floor here because there are some questions coming through the chat. So the first one is, do households have to pay the community for land under their additions?
No, they do not. But the condo fee changes. So at one point, when we first built, we had kind of 5 house types. And the condo fee was set at 5 different levels for those 5 houses. And what we discovered is that there was a great different value in the houses, because some of them, because we're on a hill, had a walkout basement, and some people moved in and immediately finished their basements and started renting them to people, to students in the area. And then other people had unfinished attics, and they immediately finished their attics. So all of a sudden they had more square footage. And so there was some griping about the condo fees. And so we set up, it was this kind of this weird process in which we made a spreadsheet, and I participated in that. And we gave different value for different square footage. So the first floor is the most accessible, most valuable. The basement level is less so, the second level, you know, we gave different factors, like multiplication factors for different values of square footage, including decks and porches and so now, and also we just said there's a being there factor, like 60% of the fee or 40, I don't even remember, of the fee is just for being there, because it doesn't matter how many people live in your house or how big your house is, we have to plow, we have to mow, we have to pay condo, we have to pay taxes on the common house. So we've built a spreadsheet, and now the easy thing is if somebody does an addition, we just add that square footage to that spreadsheet, and their condo fee automatically goes up proportionally. And so that isn't controversial, but it was hard to figure out those numbers and make it fair.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is, how do you handle the roof-mounted photovoltaic panels for re-roofing?
Well, we as a community decided to re-roof all the entire community a few years easy. We had 20-year shingles, I think, and around 15 years in, they weren't looking so great. And that's about the time people wanted to put on photovoltaics. So we made a decision that the community would replace the roofs a little bit early, starting with the households that wanted the solar panels. And so the roofs were replaced underneath them. The understanding is that when we re-roof in the future, like 20 years from now, the people with the solar panels will pay to have the panels removed. The community will pay for the re-roofing, and then they'll get remounted at the expense of the homeowner. But presumably the panels actually protect the roof somewhat. Now, if it was metal roofing that was going to last much longer, it would be different. But we do have asphalt. So presumably sometime we'll have to remove the panels and re-roof.
Okay. I think you answered this one, but I'll read it out just in case there's more to say about it. Do you change condo fees based on internal changes such as total basement finishing that changes the value of the property?
Sort of. Yeah, we do that by that square footage chart. And different basements have different multiplication factors. So if you have a walkout basement with a door, it can be made into an apartment or a really nice place. Or if you have a view out basement with just nice windows, or if you just have a basement with no windows. We give different multiplication factors. Okay.
Can you speak more about color choices? How do you balance personal opinion and community input?
Somehow we came up with a palette many years ago, partly based on what was available for the siding that we purchased, and just let people choose from that palette. And then when we did a repainting job, we allowed people to choose whatever color they wanted up in the gable of their house. And we let people do sort of whatever color door they want. The trim is standard, sort of white throughout. We had a few people ask to do a different color trim, and it was allowed. They had to pay a little bit extra because when we had it repainted, the painter just wanted more money to do different colors. So that's never an easy thing. I think it's better to have a small committee come up with a proposal, or a couple different proposals, get input, and then run with it.
Okay. So someone's asking if we could have access to the document you mentioned about the common house use. Is that a policy you'd be willing to share?
Yes. I don't know where you'd want to put it though. In the same.
I can just put it with the WebChat documents. That's
Okay.
They won't find it
The
by
other thing is
topic,
you just
but
get me to do a web chat on common house use in the future, and then we'll put it with that.
Perfect. I like that idea. Okay. We have a few comments, just people feeling good about their procedures that they've set up and appreciating all of the great advice here. And
Are there are there folks out there that already have procedures that are similar or vastly different, or that they're still struggling with?
anyone want to unmute and chime in about your community's design review? What's working, what's not? I wouldn't have believed that co-housers were this quiet, but this is sort of how the web chats have gone.
Yeah.
Mostly we get feedback through the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have about 15 more minutes. It's your chance to ask an architect anything you want about co-housing.
Mm-hmm. So where it says down there 10 chats, are those items that you've already answered, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I hope so. If not, then someone raise your hand, and Rick has something here, I think.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
When we were trying to figure out some color considerations, like the color of our big building sign, you could have talked about it forever. So we put different color, names of different colors or samples of colors on pieces of paper, and we spread them around the room. And without talking, people just wander over to the couch or whatever that had the color they preferred the most. And then, you know, people kind of figure out what was happening, and then they'd wander over to the second choice or whatever. And so that's how we ended up coming up with kind of a walking consensus without talking about it to determine what color would be the one to go for.
That sounds like a good method. I also use something whenever I'm doing design meetings called love it, like it, live with it, can't live with it. And I get people, you don't usually get to vote when you're doing consensus, but if everyone votes on, let's say it was the color red for the common house, the color green for the common house, or the color yellow for the common house, and you narrowed it down, and now we're trying to get consensus of, you know, 25 households on the color of the common house. Then you could ask each person to raise their hand if they love the color red, and each person to raise their hand if they love the color yellow. And you do love it, like it, hate it, don't like it, and hate it for all of those. And each person can vote once for each color, whether they love it or like it. And then you just look at the chart, and you can see that, oh, well, a lot of people love red, but some people hate it. And a lot of people love yellow, and no one hates it. And then you can see that a lot of people hated green, and it's just, sometimes you can just see the consensus, because consensus actually means, or consent basically means that you can live with the decision, even if it's not your favorite.
Great. Another question came in that says, for those of us just starting out, do you have any big design principles that we should keep in mind?
As in, you haven't designed the community yet, or in terms of additions that happen later?
That's April. Do you want to, I can unmute you and see if you can answer. I thought I could unmute you. It's not taking. I don't know why.
Well, I can answer for both.
I think I managed to unmute it. Yeah, thank you. We have not built anything yet. We're just starting out in that. We're just group forming. So I guess I just wanted to know if you had any big principles we should start embracing now. Maybe
Sure.
head off problems.
The very important thing I think you should do is write a design program. So whether you hire an architect to help you with that or not, obviously I have my opinions about that, but the design program is like a recipe is to a meal. It's where you look and you see the different ingredients. You see that there'll be 24 houses, that the houses will be all duplexes, or the houses, if it's an urban situation, will be townhouses next to each other, or there'll be flats for aging in place and accessibility with an elevator to the common house. But you write it all out, and and often it involves, and in the process of writing it out, you discover places where you don't have consensus, because you might all agree that they're going to be townhouses next to each other, but you haven't decided if they're going to be, whether the parking is going to be underground or surface or clustered or broken apart into little pieces or even attached garages. Like, that might be the issue that you struggle with. So while you're building this, you also are developing issues that have to be tackled later. But you can set up agendas for meetings based on that initial work. So you can say, well, we have to put parking on the agenda, but you don't necessarily have to put townhouses on the agenda because you already know it. I mean, it's just the design program is a way to map out all the decisions that have to be made and the ones that have been made. And that design program can then be given to an architect to help you design it. Or it can be become guidelines for each individual to design their house to match those. The other thing I would suggest is that you limit the number of building types, unless you're doing a lot model where everyone gets to do their own house. Severely limit the number of building types, and severely limit the number of customizations people can do, because particularly if you have a design review process, they can do those customizations later and save a lot of hassle, time, and money during construction if you don't have a lot of customizations early. I keep the architecture simple. At least in New England, we're used to like really simple, kind of boxy, but beautiful buildings. If you look at our old meeting houses, if you look at the old just homes, they were rectangular. And to build like in a Victorian crazy way now, and lots of jigs and jogs, every jig and jog costs you money, not only in construction, but also in maintenance and also in loss of energy efficiency. So simple is beautiful. And I also would say design for the space between the buildings. You don't move into co-housing for your dream home. You move into the co-housing for your dream community, and community happens between the buildings. So keep that in mind. Did that help?
Sounds great to me. And I'm picturing myself cutting out this piece of the video and putting it on a different page of the website. So
actually, somebody here said they were working with Chris Cott-Hansen, and Chris was one of the people who I think Chris Cott-Hansen and our firm, Kraus Fitch Architects, and now Fitch Architecture, and Chuck and Katie, we all do early design programming with groups. So it's the piece of really helping them write that menu for their buildings and site design.
Wonderful. So one more question's come up. How does responsibility/liability for changes carry forward when ownership changes?
Well, I think that it's in a condominium association, the condo owns exterior of the buildings. So the only liability that a new homeowner would have for the exterior of the buildings is, well, there's a good question. If they did an addition the previous owner and it had a 3-year warranty and you're only partway through the warranty, then you're buying the rest of that warranty. So the new homeowner would have to be aware of that their house wasn't, the addition itself wasn't fully covered by the condominium yet. But in terms of if somebody like made penetrations in the wall and then there was a lot of humidity that entered the wall and damaged the building, we would be in an awkward situation to try to figure that out. I don't know. I mean, people buying in are responsible to learning our policies, and we do have our policies online, and they do meet with people who help them understand our policies. But you know, that would be easy for them to overlook that.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question if anybody has one. How big is your committee for design review?
I'd say it's usually about 5 or 6 people at a meeting. We only meet 4 times a year. Because, and that's only to sort of update the manual or to talk about whether we should be doing some outreach. Like we do in our general circles, we try to do what we call educational minutes, and sometimes design review will have an educational minute and we'll remind people, oh, here's the checklist, or remind people don't make holes in your walls, or, you know, start early if you want to go through this process. So we do these academic minutes, and so we get together maybe 4 times a year to do something related to our general business. But then we meet, it's one of the few circles that meets when a project comes up, right? Like Common House Circle meets every month to talk about Common House, but we don't have anything. But when a big change, when somebody's proposing a change, then we have to meet. And so then we actually have additional people that we call on. So there's the 5 people who are sort of more interested in policy and just keeping design review as a working, living circle. And then the other people are interested in giving feedback because they like design. So they'll be called upon to come to meetings when we're reviewing a project.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Laura, for all that great information, and thanks to everyone else for being here. It's really fun to see everyone, and week to week, a lot of you are the same folks, and I'm just delighted to be seeing you on this ongoing basis, so thank you. You're familiar now with my usual closing spiel. So again, a reminder that if this was useful to you and you want them to keep happening, we certainly appreciate your support at the association. It is largely donation funded. So that's what allows these things to happen. I also want to remind you that the National Cohousing Conference in Portland is this May, the end of May, early June, and registrations are open. If you haven't registered yet, I encourage you to do that. Early registrations help us a lot with planning, so that's one reason to do it. And the other is there's an early bird special, so you get some discount. And we may sell out this year. We're already 100 registrations in, so that's pretty exciting for this early in the process. And we do anticipate that some of the tours and intensives are pretty likely to sell out. So if you know you're going to go ahead and get on there and register. You can get there through the website, or it's 2019.cohousing.org to get directly to the conference website. And then we'll see you next week. Ted Rao is going to be here. I guess we're having a Pioneer Valley little window here in our web chats. And he's going to be talking, I think, about meetings. But that's Thursday of next week, February 7th, same time, same Zoom link. And that wraps us up for tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Stay warm.